Then I moved to Germany. I was 18. I didn't speak a word of German. I studied mechanical engineering in the University of Karlsruhe. And then I was, as a proper German engineer, started working for Mercedes-Benz, who sent me to South Africa to solve a problem. So when I landed there in the plant in South Africa, we had this multi-million problem of parts. They were in the plant, but not in the system, or they were in the system, but not in the plant. So they were called lost in plant. Sounds like a simple problem. It isn't. And I was 23. I had no idea. I probably couldn't even spell transformation or change management. And so I had a great boss, and she told me, you just go and ask people. So I went around, talked to people, and actually what I found out is that the workers on the plant, who were supposed to do the work, they didn't understand, they couldn't read English, and they obviously didn't understand the language most of the time, but everything was done in English. So it's like, okay, so if people don't understand what they're supposed to do, how we expect them to do what they're supposed to do? So part of the presentation, so I did all this analysis and nice charts, went to the top management meeting, and part of the presentation was, before we change the system, before we change the processes, let's do a training in Xhosa, which is the language of the people there. Yeah, let's try to make the documentation in Xhosa. Everyone looked at me. So this is the first time I encountered something in change management, which is, I call barriers. We have a lot of mental barriers. People said, no, but English is our official language, and blah, 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 and we won't find people, and tons of excuses why we can't do it. And so I was quite cross, and I said, okay, do you want me to solve the problem, or do you want the people to learn English? Yeah? And somehow we could convince them. And interestingly, another learning for me from change management, which I was lucky enough to learn very early, is you always have unintended consequences. So you do A because you think you will get B, but actually you get something totally different. So doing the training and doing these conversations in Xhosa not only actually helped them understand what was going on, but they felt extremely valued. They felt that their culture, their language, they felt that their needs, as a human being, were extremely valued. And actually created a connection between the change team and these people. So this is, and that's for, they really put like 120 or 150%. So this was my second early learning, is when you create an emotional connection with people, they move walls for you. And maybe they don't move walls for you, they move walls for themselves. Because they feel that they share the values that you share with them. And actually, you wouldn't believe that this intervention, if you want to call it, or this action, I think cost like $10,000, which was like nothing, and solved 70% of a multi-million euro problem. So you don't always need, big problems don't always need big solutions. So being quite, and it's interesting, I still keep this. This motivates me when I have bad days. So when I left the country after 6 months and went down to the shop floor, the workers, to say goodbye to me, stand and sang a traditional African song, which was really, I was tears in my eyes, and it was such a nice moment that when I'm sitting in management meetings nowadays and think I'm gonna kill someone, I kind of remember that situation where I had this song. So the thing is, it's nice to have success at the beginning of your career, but it's also not always nice, because you think, now I can, move mountains. So flew back to Stuttgart, and people said, oh, you are the great change manager. We're gonna give you a stretch assignment. You're going to be responsible for knowledge transfer in the PMI between Daimler and Chrysler. And I was like, yes, I can do this, It didn't go out well. Trust me, it was quite a big failure. I underestimated the complexity, the political things behind it. I was just, too young, too inexperienced, and most importantly, not networked enough. I didn't know enough people who I could influence. And it was quite a shock for me, but on the other side, what I've learned about change management over the last years, I think I was a normal company, because trust me, talking about best practices in change management is not a rewarding and easy task. because basically 70%, every study you look at, it's between 70 or 80% of change programs or initiatives fail. Yeah? You don't have to believe everything McKinsey says, I don't, but this number I do. Their last study, I think, was about 70% of change initiatives fail. So if you've ever failed in your life in a change, that's normal. That's the normal status. I mean, just to understand this number, imagine 70 or 80% of the time your computer is not working. Or imagine, I don't know, you want to fly from here, from Frankfurt to New York, and every time you board the plane, you know with certainty that in 70% of the time you will not end up in New York, but you will end up in Moscow, yeah? And maybe before you have to leave the flight, they will ask you to pay a 3,000 euro fine because the flight got much more expensive when you are in the air. And when you leave the airplane, you discover that your luggage was left behind. And probably your children too. Yeah? And then your spouse is so mad at you that they file for divorce. But this is every day's experience with change management. This is exactly every day's experience with change management. So how long do you think such an airplane will stay in business? If 70% of the time you never reach New York? Probably not a day, huh? And still we continue, even with these big failures, we continue doing change management the way we did it. We kind of seem to be happy with this disaster. So why? So I'm asking myself, why? Why? Is it because we lack knowledge? So Saturday, actually, I've done a Google search and typed change management in it, okay? And so after 29 seconds, I have 1,260,000,000 results. Good luck, okay, reading this. Is it because we have a lack of consultants? If you add consulting, you get within 27 seconds 94,400,000 results. So it doesn't seem to be really the reason. So why? Why is that? So reflecting on really these 18 years of work, if I want to say, and also the last, let's say, 12 years of being a change consultant and a coach, I was thinking about what are the reasons that I and my team, that we experience. So I'm going to tell you what you shouldn't do. Because if, 80% failure, so we can learn a lot from these failures, what I think is done, what is wrong. So to start with, I'm going to give you a history of organizations, a 1,000-year history of organization in 2 minutes, okay? So at some point we started tribal, which means some tribes which are mostly local, some of them moved, quietly connected, story-based, etc. So the first real organization that happened after the tribal one was actually aristocratic. So you had very few people with all the wealth, all the knowledge, and everyone else was basically poor and hungry for many thousands years. Yeah? And so the knowledge also went always kind of top down. And it depended, and you have all these fairy tales about, or stories about these great kings. So if you happen to have a great king once in a 5,000 year, then you had a really lot of prosperity. But the rest of the 4,999 years, everyone was poor and hungry and full of wars. Yeah? What happened then with the Industrial Revolution is that basically we created something that looks maybe like that, a pyramid. And we said, at the beginning you had owners of companies and workers. And because, it became more complex, especially with automotive industry, was probably the start of it, we created something called minute management. So the idea behind this is basically, you have here a big brain, yeah, to think. Then you have here big ears, yeah, to be able kind of to translate top down and bottom up. And then down here, you have big muscles, yeah, to do the work. Yeah? And then you have all these words of cascading and all these language that we use. But it was quite a machine way to look at things. And I think it starts with, you know, Aristotle said we human are rational animals. I think everyone only kept the rational and forget the animal side of it. And even with, you know, I think Germans fault also with having Descartes, you know, in the south of Germany, sitting and closing a door and thinking. So it's clear that he came up that we are thinking beings and nothing else. So to find our soul, you have to put our brain in a scan. Yeah. So this comes, you know, basically from this view of the word, which is quite mechanistic. But then something happened. The word started to change faster. We were like, oh, until this comes here and go up, it takes ages. We are too slow. Competitors are faster. So we need something different. So we started doing matrix organizations. Yeah. So we said, yeah, this is regional and this is functional. But then you discovered actually you had something else. You also had products, so you needed another layer for products. Yeah. And then maybe you needed another layer for other functions. So basically, most matrix organizations nowadays are so complex and have so many layers that nobody understands them. Huh? I was working with a client in the chemical industry, and I met their CEO, and I said, you know what, I'm consulting you like for 3 or 4 years. I think I'm not the dumbest person on the word, but I don't understand your organization. And she said, me neither. Yeah? So I think it's a kind of a transition phase to something different, which a lot of people nowadays talk about network, which you are basically here. You are a network. And trust me, these things do not exist. Have you ever seen an organization? I mean, these are kind of picture. This is our mental model, how we look at things. You know, so depends on how we draw them is change our mind. So network organization, they say you have something like that where you have different people or groups connected, which maybe meets the formal organigram or maybe doesn't. Yeah? So what you can see here, it's maybe going back to tribal, but on a different level, on a global level, on a different conscious level. So what you can see here, you can see like we have here 3 communities. We have, and I'll come back to that, some in the middle here, which we can call hubs or influencers. And you have also people connecting communities. And I'll go back to this picture more often. But it doesn't say where the boss is. Okay? So it doesn't mean the boss is here. The boss could be here. And I see this with a lot of top management teams. Actually, they always spend the time with the same people. So they're actually confined in a comfortable corner in the organization. So they can't do much harm. Yeah? But actually, they cannot also not influence much. Yeah? So the first question is really here. If we are living in such a world and doing change and more with these tools, is this maybe one reason? And also the newer generation, they really look at it totally different. I have, we had a young intern, very talented, Yanis was his name, and I told him, you know, one of our clients loved him, a pharmaceutical company, and so I said, would you like to go work there for them? And he said, I don't feel the urge to hire a boss. Yeah? I don't feel the urge to hire a boss. This is what he said. Yeah? And he's now in Berlin, has created the most amazing startup, very successful. So I think we shouldn't take this for too easy. I think that corporations and big organizations are an endangered species. They are. It's not because they've been there for 150 years or so that they will be there forever. I think there are a lot of things that are going to move and change that. So let me move to the next part, why not? Why not? Why we have a lot of failure. The second one I put broadcasting. A lot of people think communication is change. And when I think communication, they think broadcasting. So old word, TV, yeah? I'm selling the thing to you. Yeah? But that's not communication. This is someone talking at me. And maybe I'm listening, maybe I'm not. Yeah? So communication is dialogue. Communication means today more asking the right questions than giving the right answers. And what I hate in change management, and when people like sell these big bang projects with these big bang names. Have you ever introduced a new IT system? Maybe not. And then you come and say, how great this new check-in system will be, yeah? Or how great this new RP system will be. And so you create such a high expectation, and basically later people experience all the crap, and what you make is people become very cynical. They don't trust you anymore. Yeah? So, and you give those programs great names, you know, like impact and, you know, reinvent. And, but programs come from this old word where you had a beginning and an end. If you live in a dynamic network, you don't need programs. Maybe analysts do need programs, yeah? But you don't need programs because programs create the thing of, okay, ta-da, we are having this big change program and this is going to solve our world. And if people still believe you, maybe they'll follow you, and then they experience like, oh, it's so messy and ugly and hard. And then suddenly the crisis is over, or the CEO leaves, or whatever happens, and then everyone is happy because we can go back to normal until the next program arrives. Yeah? Maybe not in your organization, okay, but yeah, everywhere else. Yeah? So this kind of broadcasting, what I tell people nowadays, I say, if you start a change project, don't communicate, don't sell. You know, let the success sell the project. I mean, imagine you three who started this event today, imagine no one would have signed up. Okay, it's a personal disappointment, but it wouldn't have been a big PR disaster. Yeah? Maybe you would have gone again to another Mexican restaurant and had another, you know, red wine, yeah? But actually, it would be, okay, no one heard about it, we make a next try next time, maybe differently, learn from it, yeah? So this idea of, you know, over-communicating and under-experiencing, yeah? But it's also with consumers. You know, if you have these big ads, but you experience a company totally different, so the story and the experience have to fit together. And my friend Leandro Herrero, who wrote the book Viral Change, I love his approach because he says, you know, you start something somewhere, here, and you see if, you know, you have your influencers, and if enough people imitate them, if enough people follow them, then it will become a movement. You know, the Arab Spring didn't happen because someone sat and had a plan and PowerPoints, yeah? Its movements happen because people value things differently for themselves, and then they follow you. So broadcasting is really a bad idea. And selling project is a bad idea. Because if you have to sell them, it means something is wrong. Yeah? The second thing is, there is a lot of blah, blah, blah. Yeah? There is a lot of management jargon. You know, I've written a list of things that I hear sometimes in client, and they say like, oh, we have to do more with less. We have to be faster quality. We have to do customer service. Being innovative and agile. Best place to work. The new buzzword is game changer. Yeah? And all needs to happen by yesterday. And no one knows how to do it. Yeah? What does this really mean? What does it mean to be customer oriented? Maybe it means for me totally different than for you. Yeah? And then, have you ever had this, like a top manager sits there and it's like, we all have to be customer oriented. We have to be more entrepreneurial. And then, have you ever experienced someone in the room standing and say, excuse me, I don't understand what you mean? Do you ever hear this? Not very often. But actually what happens then, after the event, we go into the elevator and I say, Christian, there's crap, you know? This is never gonna work, you know, because they forgot, you know, half of the organization in Asia, you know, and they didn't get that. And then you will say, oh yeah, you know, and then afterwards it fails. And we say, I told you it's not gonna work. Because basically, we use a lot of this jargon without really explaining what it means. So the question is what you can use is behaviors. How it does really look different. With this communication company, we even translated it like to say, for a technician, customer-oriented, when you go to a house to repair someone's phone, you take your shoes off. Yeah? Or when you call a call center and you say, you stupid guys, because you're angry as a customer, they would tell you, I'm sorry. We have angered you. And I'm not saying about being over-controlling and telling people what to say, but I think that often, if people knew, they would have changed probably. It's just that a lot of people don't have the picture. Because if you live in a world, in your world, you sometimes don't know how that the other world looks like, and you need help. And to be more customer-oriented helps no one, because it's just blah, blah, blah. Yeah? So what does it really mean? How is it different? How will you behave differently? And who will see that? Who will recognize that? Because, to be honest, I mean, you talk about culture and mindset. I've never seen a mindset. I don't know if you have ever seen a mindset. You know, I'm coaching for 12 years. I've never seen a mindset. Yeah? So give me behavior. Yeah? I can see behavior. I can change behavior. I can reflect on behavior. Yeah? Because this is something that you see, that you can, you know, videotape, and then you can see a different behavior. Yeah? I always take the example, there's this fight, do you change first the mindset or behavior? I take the example of my daughters and them brushing their teeth. If I waited until they changed their mindset toward brushing teeth, yeah, they'd probably be adult and have no teeth anymore. Yeah? So actually we train the behavior of brushing teeth. Yeah, with different motivational techniques, some successful, not so successful. But basically, until it becomes a second habit, I do believe that when you change behavior, you can change culture and mindset. The other way around, I think, doesn't work. It's very difficult. The next thing that you see, which I call here is big egos. You know, sometimes I remember from an insurance company, there was a new CEO coming, and we've worked with the company for a while. And then he said, you know, what would you recommend me? You know, what would thing to do to really change? Because we are too complacent, we are not competitive, we're going to disappear. And I think he was right, partly. I said, don't start a program. Because everyone before started a program, so it wouldn't be a change. It would be like, again, the same thing. Yeah? What did he do 2 weeks later? He started a big program, okay, which actually failed. But anyway, so big egos, I sometimes think, I'm sometimes cynical myself and say, you know, these big programs are just for people to have big egos so that they can say, I'm doing something. But big egos also in the sense of thinking that, you know, change is great, you all change, guys, okay? So when I do interviews, sometimes, you know, with the preparation of change projects, I very, very rarely hear from people like, this is why it's not working, this is my contribution. They tell me about what's wrong in the organization, what's wrong with the employees, what's wrong with the system, what's wrong with processes, but nobody actually says, if I think about my own behavior, the own decision that I make, you know, my own contribution to it, this is it, and I need to change. Change seems to be always great when other people change. Yeah, but it's kind of, where does it start? Yeah, does it start with me? The next one is, I think, we think too binary. Yeah? I believe that nowadays we need to be more anthropologist than scientist. You know, the science, this idea of there is right and wrong, white and black, also come from an industrial revolution, from an old word. Yeah? So Lego, for example, was really struggling. They were almost going bankrupt when they had to fight against all the, you know, online and computer games. And actually what they did is they sent people to watch children play again. They didn't, you know, order a market research with, you know, lots of interviews. They went and watched how children play and what play means for children, like maybe comparing themselves to peers, creating certain situations. And actually since then, since using this more anthropologist, social, you know, way of looking at interactions, they're now, again, extremely successful. But they had to forget certain ways of doing things. So, and you're here all change agents, so you know when you enter an organization, it's about looking at what patterns, what's going on there. I think that change really needs to move from, maybe you know this Kurt Lewin old thing about when you change, when you start, you have to unfreeze and then kind of change and refreeze. But this has the assumption that the world is stable. So you have to shake the tree, and words like sense of urgency come there. I don't think anyone lacks sense of urgency nowadays, but okay. So like you have to shake the tree, you have to change it, and then to make it stable again. Yeah? Which I believe it's nice maybe for a different word. Also the change curve we use and all these tools, they're really helpful for today. I think it's different. I think it's the other way around. I think that we live in a world where there is a lot of change going on. You know, I don't think many people come in the morning and say, today I'm not gonna change. I'm making all my best to be really difficult. Yeah? And this is my goal for the day. Yeah? I think everyone wakes up in the morning and wants to make, you know, the best they can. And so our world, there is a lot of change going on. And basically when you start change is actually rather maybe freeze first, maybe stop just for a second, look at it, to reflect. I had a client, and I love his quote. He told me he's a manufacturing head, and he said, every time I take over a new plant, I just walk in the plant and try to hear the symphony. I try to hear the symphony that is playing in this plant, to understand the patterns, because then when you understand the symphony, you can know where to adjust. So you can look at where is maybe change that is already in the way that behavior. Where are the positive deviants? Where are people who are already fighting, you know, to get us to the next step? And then you can, you know, and where are maybe dysfunctional patterns? And then you can adjust, you can support the people who are really doing it the way you want. And you can maybe adjust, remove some obstacles, and basically then, you know, put it back to normal. And so, you know, adjust and then unfreeze, if you want to call it unfreeze. So it's actually the opposite. You just think that a lot of going on, and you have to just look at what can I support? And the role of leaders here, that's why it's called backstage, you know, big ego is very backstage. It's not front stage. It's basically looking at where are roadblocks and where are obstacles that I can help you remove. This is my role. It's not to be kind of on the front with a big ego. So we all have to learn more about psychology, more about sociology, more about anthropology. I think this really will help us more to understand interactions and social connections. So, and the last part is that also, I think that people are fed up of people who are not real. You know, I want to go back to my first story. It's about creating connection. And if you watch TED, you've seen Brené Brown's video now with 13 million people having watched it about vulnerability. If you didn't, I encourage you to watch it. It's because we all have a really hunger for a sense of belonging and connection. This is a very normal human need. And I think that corporations in the last 100 years or 150 years, you know, you enter in a corporation, and at a very early stage, you learn you have to be a certain way. You have to disconnect basically from who you are. So from Saturday and Sunday, people are nice, they're honest, yeah, they're fun, they're human, and Monday to Friday they become machines, yeah. Sometimes even killers, but you know, like where, you know, you have to behave in a certain way. You are not allowed to be emotional, and then you cannot be true to who you are, and then you are totally disconnected from yourself and from others. And no wonder no one believes you, no one follows you. I mean, you probably all seen all these type of people, and we ourselves also like that. Sometimes we really have to manage our behavior. It takes so much energy. Like 80% of our energy is managing our behavior to fit in a kind of way of how to be, and then we have 20% left to kind of do the work. And for me, one of the most inspiring work we do is, I give you an example from an oil and gas company who invited us, and actually one of their business unit heads was really struggling and really lost connection with his team. The business was struggling. So the first kind of day or two we spent together, we went really outside of the company just with this person. The two of us were there, and I discovered he was really on a kind of a survival mode, yeah? And survival mode makes you like, you know, looking only in very tiny boxes, you don't see the rest. And he was totally disconnected from himself, because he felt like if he connects to who he is and to himself, he wouldn't maybe be able to do the job anymore. And actually, after the first team workshop, where he started talking about his struggles, the whole team was behind him. We always think about being vulnerable, verletzlich, as being a weakness. It's not. Every time you see someone being vulnerable, you think this is courageous, this is courage. Yeah? And actually in the workshop, I remember, because there was another guy who was heading business development. So the business unit had started by saying where he struggles. And then we invited everyone to share their fears. And there was a guy, a business development head, everyone was beating on him. Business development is crap. They're not doing the right mergers and acquisition. They're doing not the right work. And he stood up and said, you know what? I've always been chosen. I've always been #1 for jobs. They've always chose me. This is the first time in a job that I feel I'm gonna fail. I'm not managing. And he even had a tear in his eye. And this was a tipping moment, because the atmosphere went from his crap to how can we help him succeed? You know, we are all in the same boat. How can we help him succeed? And I'm actually very optimistic, because I work a lot with young people. I have 2 small daughters, and I see that they come with a totally different expectations. They don't want this glossy thing, you know? And when I talk about being connected and being vulnerable, I'm not saying being nice and wearing Birkenstock and white socks and sitting in circles and, you know, hugging each other. I mean, hugging each other, fine. But I mean, but I think also about, you know, human connections are not tidy, you know? They're ugly, you know, sometimes, and you have to talk hard stuff. So it's not about just being connected, it's also being tough sometimes. But you can be tough when you're connected in a different way. Yeah? So what I want to ask you, and offer you this question to ask yourself over and over again, is, do you truly care? Do you care about what you do, about the people you work with, about yourself? Are you real and authentic? Or does what's hindering you from being real and authentic? You know, we have an internal joke in our company that people say, when people tell them, you know, what's the work we do? They say we bring CEOs to cry. We make CEOs cry, which is true in a sense, because, you know, I think that the BP CEO should have cried after the oil spill. You know, it's kind of reconnecting people with themselves, and in that way reconnecting them with their employees. And it's not, a lot of people think, yeah, it's doing good, but are we really doing well? I think that it will merge, and I'm not the only one. If you look at, traditionally, if you say this is doing well, like business-wise, profit-wise, this was the business world and corporations. And then you had doing good. This was like NGOs and foundations. So basically you had to choose, do I have to earn money in my life, or do I have to do something good? Yeah. So, but actually, the generation Y, and I like Y because it feels like why, with question mark, you know, I think the future of business will be here. It will be about doing good and doing well. You will not have the choice, yeah? So I'm not there about, so you, and there is a huge thing about purpose economy. We work with Aaron Hurst, who's writing his book now about purpose economy. We see we moved from industrial economy to information economy. The next phase will be purpose economy. The next phase is the human era, yeah? And it's all about being here and being purpose driven. So do you trust, and are you able to connect? I think that's also a key question that we have to ask ourselves over and over again. Oh, and mostly, if we are not that, it's because we have fears, you know, and fears are blocking us somewhere. Fear to lose something, fear that someone hurts me, fear of not belonging and not being connected. This is what holds us back. But the interesting thing is, if we are not that, you know, we cannot just, you know, decide not to have the bad feeling like fears and anger and the messy part, but have the nice part. It doesn't work. We cannot split ourselves. You know, if you don't experience, and research shows, if you don't experience fear, you don't experience joy. If you don't experience, you know, anger, you don't experience creativity. You cannot just kind of select what you want to feel and, you know, and select what you want to feel.